Hi everyone, it's Lynn, and welcome back to another video. Today I wanted to participate in Candy's hashtag, the Cabinet of Curiosities. I believe it's called 10 Decks of Curiosity, I believe. 10 Curiosity decks. I'm not sure if after the pile of tarot decks I have on the table, if I will have 10. I probably do, but we'll see. I have a couple of oracles dotted throughout this because I don't have an extensive collection. I only have about 30, maybe 35 decks. So I had to kind of get 10 that I believed would be in this curiosity cabinet from that small collection. So I guess we'll start. Let's start at the very beginning. Okay. The first deck is my deck. This is my Candescent Oracle. It's an oracle that I made using mainly Curiosities art, that art style, where there's an emphasis on dark versus light and shadow. And I have the deck on Make Playing Cards for sale if you're interested, but there's different backings which are more symmetrical, which means you could do reversals, and I've changed the font just to make it a little bit more friendly for like purchasing. And it's really been a terrific deck lately, working with some of my black and white decks and working with that sort of light and shadow within my own life, I guess you could say. Some of the images on here just invoke so many emotions in me that I needed a deck. I mean, first and foremost, Curiosities art is like probably my favorite art style. This whole super exposed imagery. I mean, not all of them, but most of them are like Curiosities, where the light is just, it pops so heavily, like with barely any background. I just love that. And I needed a deck that reflected that love. And so when I work with this, I'm getting such a light versus shadow. And for me, it's in the Cabinet of Curiosities because of its ability to become dark. Now, before we get any more into the list here that I have, in terms of Cabinet of Curiosities, I like to think of what would be included in them, right? And typically, it's nature things, it's phantasmagoria, it's man-made things, it's weird nature-made things that, like, almost deformations, mutations, things like that, things that you wouldn't normally see, almost rarefied objects as well. And not that this or any of the decks I'll show are rare, but it's that ability to be something else besides what it is. Its ability to transform. Like, this is not just an ordinary oracle deck to me. This has become this weird entity, right? That is like a two-headed dog. And that's what I love about transformative decks of cards. And so mainly when I wanted to captivate this hashtag, I wanted to go kind of that route, you know. We could do dark and spooky, we can do the doll's head, we can do the crystals and the old keys and my snake skin. You know, those are just some of the objects, of course, my bones. Those are always going to be present in Cabinets of Curiosities, but we can always do just these things, these decks' ability to bring forth emotions within us. And that's something special. I think that anything that sparks our curiosity to an extent, it aids. It's an aid. It becomes a tool. And when we think of curiosities, you don't necessarily think of them as tools. Like, they just stay locked in a cabinet. But they're sort of tools of inspiration. And I think that that's a beautiful thing. I think that when if I were to have this huge cabinet of curiosities and, you know, have all these like weird things in them, right? It would act as a source of inspiration for me. Even if I don't like go into the cabinet and touch the things all the time, it would still become like this source of magic, right? Like this cabinet is concealed of, you know, concealed of magic and what have you. So anyways, rambling, we only done one deck. So this, there are a few images on Make Playing Cards, but I'm hoping to get a prototype soon of the new version of this Candescent Oracle. But if you want to see just a few images of that, it's on Make Playing Cards linked below. So that was number one. Now this is, I'm not really going in any kind of order. This is the Tarot of Spirit. And at first I didn't want to consider it part of my curiosity cabinet. So I didn't necessarily think about this deck in any kind of curiosity way, like creepy or weird, if that's the route we're going, even though those terms don't mean what they mean to normal people to me. But I think that this deck has an ability to shapeshift. Like what I see in this image may not be what someone else sees, and it kind of seems to change reading per reading. Now again, like the Oracle I was talking about its transformation properties, but for this, it's an actual shapeshifter. The rays of light here have an ability to, like, I'll throw this and a couple of other cards down and it means something. But then when I throw it down again, this looks like something totally different. Maybe I get some kind of geometry out of it. And there's really an ability of this deck to be kind of shapeless, kind of formless. And it's that shapelessness of this deck is what makes it a curiosity for me. So it's not necessarily transformational, it's more shapelessness. Formless, almost. Like, some of the images you could really just go into. And it may not mean what you think it means. And if it does, you sink in and you kind of melt within the colors, melt within the abstraction, and become one with that world, with that colorful world. But within that, it's kind of like watching watercolors. You know, you've seen those like little things on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, and the colors kind of melt together, and it's kind of like just easy watching, right? But that's what I feel like this deck has in terms of its ability, its superpower, I guess you could say. So that's kind of what makes it go into the Cabinet of Curiosities a little bit. I think all the decks that I'll show have some sort of superpower for me. And see, even with figures in this deck, I can still find myself floating. That's kind of what it feels like to work with this, is floating. I'm floating and I'm not really present with the images on this deck, which can lead to its own problems, I guess. Like, you need to be able to sink in. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes you just have to melt into the colors, and that's what it was meant to do for you that day. So that is the Tarot of the Spirit. Okay. The next, I pulled this out. I love this deck. This is the Shrine of the Black Medusa. And this is a collage deck, but it's a collage deck that, for me, is very cut and paste. It's very, I did this myself. This was like an art project. This wasn't, like almost vision boardy. And I don't mean that in like what we think of today in like vision board manifestation things. I mean like play. This was almost like made out of play. Like, you're not gonna get a grade for it, and you don't have to make it look good. There can be pieces of glue stuck everywhere. But to me, that's what makes it so beautiful. And I'm not sure if this is still in print, but with its ability to reenact play for me, it gets me into the mindset of cutting out images from magazines and gluing them to paper and then trying to make, you know, beautiful collages. It has an ability to speak through all of that, through the play, through the little bitty things that the creator has glued onto the surface, like this. First glance, it looks like shit's everywhere. Rays of light are glued down, you know, and there's no real pattern. But I think that's what makes it great. And I think that some of the images are, I don't want to say primitive. I want to say, like, I can't see into the image very well in some cases. But then in some, I can. It really pops. And I can really immediately tell what I'm looking at. But I think that it's kind of like play, but you have to think about what you're doing. So I guess maybe you're playing a game, but that takes a little skill, you know, to read with this deck. But it's that ability. Like, you don't know what you're going to find. You don't know what... I think that's the beauty of collage decks in general. I think that most collage decks could fit into the Cabinet of Curiosities for that reason. For its own book of symbols, you know? That the creator has just kind of... Let's go more at a time, because we're not like doing walkthroughs here. But it's just... I find so much inside collage decks that I find myself wanting to play around more with it because of that wanting to play. So it's almost like this is the deck that's in the Cabinet of Curiosities that's an actual tchotchke or toy. So it's like an old McDonald's toy. It's not meant in the bag or anything. You can still kind of play with it, but it's still technically a memorabilia. Technically it's old and rare, but sometimes because you're feeling like you need to, you get it out and play with it. That's what this deck is for me. It's definitely that sense of play, but it's kind of a rare thing all on its own, you know? And you don't want anyone else to play with it. So it's a beautiful rendition. It's Thoth inspired, so that was something that drew me to this deck. I mean, there's just some powerful images, and like they're so simple. You know, here's a magazine picture, and then they've cut and paste some random things on top to make the Four of Wands, right? But then there's others that are so intricate, like this is the Tower, you know? I just think that some of these I think that there was a method to the madness, and that in and of itself makes it beautiful to me. So that is the Shrine of the Black Medusa. And it's a beautiful tchotchke in my Cabinet of Curiosities. Okay. If I can put this back into its bag and set it down over here. I've been working with this lately. This is the Postcards from the Liminal Space. I've kind of been working with it recently, I guess. It's a good deck. Okay, it really, I guess it is. I don't necessarily think that I shouldn't be saying what makes a deck good or bad. I'm not an expert in that field. But what makes it a curiosity is its ability to talk to me from the liminal space, which is exactly what it's supposed to do. Okay? I pull this out when I am in a liminal space. I'm a fairy in the middle of a doorway, okay? I'm this entity, and I can't really tell whether I'm a part of something or outside of something, whether I'm in the room or outside of the room. I'm kind of disembodied, right? And this deck has an ability to talk me through those moments in my life. But that doesn't necessarily mean that this is like this profound thing, right? This isn't a head in a jar, okay? This is maybe something that I found. This is a fossil, right? This is a fossil I found on the creek bed when I was out hiking. Doesn't necessarily make it rare or valuable, right? It's just an ammonite that I found floating in the damn creek, but I want it in my cabinet of curiosities. And it has a place, right? So this is like the ammonite, the fossil that you find, or the arrowhead that you find. Something found, like a found object that you think is really cool, but you found it, and it doesn't mean it's worth anything. That's kind of how I think of this deck, in terms of this curiosity. So, and some of the messages don't always resonate. Sometimes I get a card and I'm like, ugh, it doesn't really jive, you know? But that's all decks. All decks do that. There's just, no deck is going to be perfect because you didn't make it. And even the ones I've made aren't perfect to me. And I've got like several. So, you know, trying to find that perfect deck. But it's just not going to happen because art doesn't work like that. You don't like one type of art. So, I do love this card. I do love that card because it makes me think of Hecate. Some of these just have such, almost like this is like an old-timey Zotar machine where you hit the button, put a quarter in, hit the button, and then like a fortune cookie message comes out. That's another thing that I kind of think about this deck. Like the messages are kind of fortune cookie-ish, which is great, and it has its place, but it's not an all the time kind of a thing. So let's get to some. This is a spell. That's cool. I'm actually thinking about taking this card out. A magician is only good as their tools. I'm thinking about taking that out of the deck, but anyway. So, it's a fabulous deck, but it's probably my found object that I want in the cabinet of curiosities. That's really cool to look at. And has fortune cookie messages, I guess. So that was the postcards from Liminal Space. Okay. Here's a Marseille, which I didn't think at first that I would put a Marseille in the cabinet of curiosities, but to be honest with you, a lot of Marseilles would be considered in the realm of old tapestries, old photographs, old manuscripts, right? I firmly believe that in the cabinet of curiosities there are books, there are portraits, there are ink drawings of all kinds of things, of nature things, of weird animals, just all kinds of cool and fascinating things. So this is number one of that picture. Actually, no, one of three of the next couple of decks that I'll show that go that route. Ink drawings, old pictures, and books type of a thing. So I love this particular imagery for the Marseille. There's something about the line work, there's something about the colors that I resonate heavily with. The backs of this are beautiful. I love the backs of these cards. But there's just something about the way that these are portrayed that I love. And that does make me think of an old book, an old manuscript. And I love it. And so for a tarot deck, oh, this is in order. Just now realized that. For a tarot deck, this, in my cabinet of curiosities, this would be some kind of old pamphlet. Maybe like the Visconti Sforza, it'd be like a pamphlet of an old-time family. Of maybe a royalty family. Some kind of monarch. But there would be a whole bunch of line drawings in them. Maybe it's a storybook. I don't know, but I'm kind of going the royalty route just because of the way that these are drawn, you know? Maybe they're colored, maybe they're not, but it's just one of those like loose, not hardback, but like leather bound, straight leather bound books. And the paper's really thick and the drawings are like this, you know? And it's beautiful. It tells a sort of a story of some kind of family. But I don't jive with Visconti Sforza, so I picked this, which is my absolute favorite rendition of a Marseille deck, which is the, if I didn't say, it's the ancient Italian tarot. So, beautiful, beautiful deck. This is my, I guess I wouldn't call this my illuminated manuscript per se, but like I said, it's more about my like small storybook that kind of fits in the bookshelf in between two manuscripts, two hardback books. And then the next one is actual portraiture. This is one of Kristen's decks. It's my smallest deck that I own. And I believe this is called the Women's Poetry Oracle. And I don't think you can get it anymore. But I'm going to leave all of Kristen's links below. Go follow her on Instagram. She comes up with amazing things. She's a fantabulous creator, okay? And I got my hands on this. It was something that, it was like PDF, and I printed it at like my Office Depot or whatever and chopped it up myself. And they come small. And the purpose of this is to use this portraiture and the small little poetry blurbs at the bottom and make poetry, or at least to inspire more poetry. And I can show you that in a minute, but let's show you some cards. So we'll do it this way so it's easier to see because my fingers will probably be in the way. And some of them are just so evocative, but this is actual like old portraiture. And I believe that in the Cabinet of Curiosities, you would see things like this. You would see old photographs, old postcards, right? Maybe they wouldn't have words on them, but they're mementos just the same. They're maybe in ornate frames, right? Maybe they're this big, like actually this big. So they're almost like mementos, actual mementos. Maybe there's a portion of your Cabinet of Curiosities that's kind of turned into a shrine. I had a china cabinet when I was first married, and over time and over the course of a few family deaths, I started to put, because I wanted to save them and I hardly go into the cabinet, I started to put the dried flowers from their funerals and little bitty portraits of them in there, and like my china cabinet became a pseudo throne. Shrine. A shrine to these dead family members of mine and my husband's. And I don't know, it's just kind of weird. I don't have the cabinet anymore. I've dismantled it and put my china somewhere else. But that's what I'm saying. So sometimes your Cabinet of Curiosities isn't necessarily about weird or the creepy. It's also about mementos, in my opinion, is what I would put in them. So this deck is so beautiful. Anyway, let me do an example of some poetry just so you can see. And you know, to be this tiny, I'm not really a mini deck type of a person. And if I had some ink, I'd probably ink the back of these to make it look even more like old-timey photos. Let's see. It's surprisingly easy to shuffle, this tiny deck. I don't know what the difference is between a mini deck, which I don't like the size of that. It just feels wrong in my hands. But then this, which is like a mini deck, feels okay. Like, I don't know. I don't know what the difference is, but there is a difference. So, all right, you got this. Usually I do 6 or 8, you know, I don't know. Sometimes I'll do 9. Now, you can read it any kind of way you want. But I'll read it like this, right? Lost tongues, streaks of midnight, wife and mother, fire in my eyes. Veils of wax, Egyptian crystals, remember me, bare eyes. Oh, I like that. Eyes and eyes. So you can read it like a whole, like kind of like try to make a sentence out of it. You could do it like this is like slam poetry almost. You could read it this way. Wife and mother, remember. Fire in my eyes, bare eyes, right? I mean, there's just so many ways that you can do this, and because it's so small, you could just throw down all kinds of variations of numbers and play around with other decks. I've played around with this with other decks as well. So this is like this is old Portraiture or Postcards in my Cabinet of Curiosities. Okay, and then the number 3 on my Portraiture illuminated manuscript type of genre, I guess you could say, with the Cabinet of Curiosities is my Tarot of Vlad Dracula. This is a fabulous deck by Travis McHenry. Now, as a lover of medieval times and this type of woodcut imagery, this is a fabulous deck just for that. But then make it Dracula, make it vampire, you know, then that's even cooler. And so this is really, really a labor of love from Travis. I feel like I just love it so much. But this, in terms of my Cabinet of Curiosities, this really feels like a book of Vlad Dracula's life. So this is one of those hardback books, like a first edition of one of those old horror stories or an old story, but it's a first edition. You don't want to let anyone to touch it. You know, that's kind of, it's in your Cabinet of Curiosities because it's so special, and there's pictures in it, and there's an old, you know, there's ribbon bookmarks, and it's just beautiful. Has a nice creaking sound when you open it. That's what this deck feels like to me in terms of a Cabinet of Curiosities. Ooh, that is an image right there. So, and with it looking like parchment, it even further goes into that. It's like it's already its own curiosity. You know, like this deck is its own curiosity all on its own. But for me, it's just that first edition book, and it's got these woodcut drawings in them, and it just stays in there, perfectly placed for safekeeping. So. This is such a good deck. And it's actually a surprisingly good reader. So, that's my Tarot of Vlad Dracula. Powerful, illuminated, not illuminated, but kind of a manuscript type deck. Now, another collage deck that I had already kind of told Candy that this would probably be in my Cabinet of Curiosities is the Voyager Tarot. Now, I sort of believe that the Voyager is in this Cabinet of Curiosities because of it being a collage deck. But really, it's the amount of things inside the collage. This isn't just like, oh, you know, 7 of Wands, you get 7 Wands, you know, and there's barely anything else in the picture. You get a whole bunch of stuff in this one card. And that's like that for every single card in this deck. So when I look at this card, actually, let's zoom in. We'll do that for you guys. Now there's a little bit of us zoomed in, okay? We see a whole bunch of stuff I'm seeing totems. I'm seeing somebody holding a sword here, like something gilded. A whole bunch of animals. A dragon lurks in the background, and an Eastern dragon. A mask. Is this mask on a, like this is its own cabinet of curiosities? And then there's just more. There's just all kinds of things in this one card for you to explore. And it's this collage deck for me in the cabinet of curiosities is like my trusty something I go exploring with. Maybe this is my staff. Maybe this is my goggles. Maybe this is my fanny pack. There's something in my cabinet of curiosities that I keep there that's like my travel, a travel tool, right? Or maybe it's a travel tool from long ago. But I feel very travel-esque when I work with this, like I'm going off to explore the world. But I'm kind of like Doctor Who as well. I'm kind of going through space and time with it all as well. Like, not necessarily my own time, but I'm going back in time and forward in time. And I think that it's got an ability to be kind of like the TARDIS about that. So, but there are images on top of images on top of images. Look at this. Here's an infant's hand, right? But then you have this old gnarled hand here. Now, Ten of Wands here is growth. And I think of growth and you see the sequoias in the background, or the redwoods, whatever I don't know what they're called, either one of those. The sense of growth over a long period of time, like from almost birth to withered, you know, or that could be even long dead, who knows. So this is like I need to travel. I need to go places. I need to find things out. And my trusty pair of goggles, or my trusty staff, walking stick that is sacred to me, like a sacred traveling tool. That's what this deck reminds me of a little bit. It's just a brilliant, oh, brilliance. It has a brilliant way of teaching me. I mean, look at all that. Look at all this in here. This is so crazy. This deck, one card of this deck could be a cabinet of curiosities all on its own. And I think that that's why it needed a space here. Ugh. They're so beautiful. So, anyway, we'll zoom back out so you can see the rest of my my curiosities. So this definitely fit in my cabinet of curiosities for its ability to chauffeur me around through time and space, and for its exploratory nature, because I want to explore things. So that was the Voyager Tarot. Definitely a curiosity. Okay. The next one is all about the creatures. Okay, the cuddly and the not so cuddly. This deck, I love. I love the creatures in this deck for their, I guess, for their ugliness. This is the Holly Simple. It's kind of a newer edition, so they pasteled the backs, which I don't like, but I'm not going to be picky about. And then I edged it in this like periwinkle color that matches. It actually worked out, you know, this kind of periwinkle color to the back. So I'm not mad at it. I just wish it was a little bit more of the like gothic raw that the first edition was, but I kind of, you know, I didn't luck out on that. So, but it's the creatures in this deck that make me think of a Cabinet of Curiosities. This is the fetus in the jar, the two-headed stuffed dog, the squirrel that was stuffed, but it has like two sets of jaws or whatever the hell, like, you know, that's what this deck is to me. And I can pet it and I can play with it and I can talk to it, but technically the damn deck is, the damn squirrel's dead, you know? It sits there in the cabinet or on top of the cabinet. I don't know. I just feel like this is some kind of taxidermy in terms of the cabinet. And it does have a kind of a weird vibe when you want to work with this. It's a vibe that the deck wants to creep you out. It wants to creep you out, but it wants you to keep playing, right? It's like watching a train wreck. Kind of like, I guess when people say that. If that's happening, I'm not watching. I'm looking away. But some people say like watching a train wreck. You can't look away. It's one of those things where sometimes it gets uncomfortable because you're like, that hand is just like floating there and you can see the bone. But I want to keep playing with it, yada, yada, yada. So that's what this deck is. Just playful, cute, excuse me, but also weird and sometimes obnoxious. So it's kind of like the weirdest taxidermy you've ever seen. I love them. And even the more muted colors that we see in this particular edition, I think that they're a little bit more saturated in the first edition. I'm not entirely sure. But these are a little bit more pastel. But look, this looks like those twins that are together. Conjoined. There you go, conjoined. That would be in a Cabinet of Curiosities. So this is like the animalistic side of the Cabinet of Curiosities. And it is a beautiful deck. I love working with it when I want that type of a vibe, you know? And it just has an ability to work with me, to work with that creepy side of me, I guess you could say. Okay, and then the last deck that I have for you guys is actually an unboxing. Recently, I had been reading some poetry by this creator called K.D. Hume. I believe that's how you say that. And their poetry was so evocative. It made me have all the feels. And then I found out that they created a tarot deck. And I don't believe that the tarot deck that they created was supposed to be this like revolutionary huge thing, okay? I think that mainly it was something that they did to help themselves through quarantine. But some of the images really spoke to the point of like asking the creator to send me more pictures of the cards, getting in contact with them. I just had to know more about the deck. Now, hashtag not my tarot aesthetic, because this deck is not my tarot aesthetic. Anyways, it came in a organza bag with this little guidebook, and it came shrink wrapped. This is the backs. I love this. It's called the Isolation Tarot, but it kind of looks apparition-esque. I kind of like it. I also like that I don't necessarily mind that it's not reversible because I don't read reversals. So I've got my handy dandy scissors here, and we're going to snip this if I can. Shrink wrap's always a bitch. But we'll see if I can do this right. Okay. Now this is a black and white deck. It's not my aesthetic, but like I said, some of the images really worked for me. And I'm not going to do a full walkthrough I'm just going to show you some of the cards. One of the cards that I fell in love with was this. It's called the Symbiote. And as a fan of Stargate, I felt like I had to have this. Just for the Stargate reference. And not that this creator had any knowledge whatsoever of Stargate, but because I do, I saw the symbiote, the Stargate symbiote within this card. So that was a beautiful thing. And it's nothing like tarot, I don't believe. Ooh, the cardstock is lovely. It's probably make playing cards smooth, if I had to guess. Yeah, probably. Which is great cardstock, to be honest with you. I don't believe that this has anything to do with tarot. I think that this is completely made up from the creator's mind, which I kind of actually like. Like the lovers as the adversaries. Come on. Like I said, I'm not going to show you every card, but this is the hooded one. The Grin Man. I'm not sure if this is spelled wrong or if this is spelled this way on purpose. Hopefully it'll tell me in the guidebook. Like, it says Grin Man, but I don't know if it's supposed to be Green Man. Again, don't know. And then the suits are eyes. Yeah, eyes. Caverns. Shadow of eyes. Monarch. Yeah. Caverns. So eyes. Caverns. Which the creator does say is their vulvas. Which I find healing in a way for me. Tentacles. Which, how cool is tentacles? For like, kind of like swords, you know, getting electrocuted. I don't even know if this correlates with the sword suit, but it's just beautiful. And then serpents. All of these things are important. Caverns, caves are huge to me. Serpents are huge to me. Not necessarily tentacles, but I think that that tentacles is such a creative way of looking at a suit in the tarot that I find it very interesting. I find it like they could have chosen any animal, and the fact that they chose a serpent and a jellyfish was ingenious. I think that that's awesome. To not go the route that most would go. How cool is that? Now, the courts are, yeah, Knave, Angel, Shadow, and Monarch. Which Monarch to me speaks to me of crone energy, but it also speaks to me of matrilineal lines, almost. Like, this is monarchy that goes way far back in your bloodline, you know? That's kind of what this particular court card means in term, you know, in me. I haven't even worked with the deck. I just opened it, but I'm super excited to get to know the deck. I will leave website and the Etsy shop below for you to go check out. And that's it. Those are my 10 decks in the Curiosity cabinet that lurks in Lennon's mind. I hope you had fun. Go check out Candy's original video and click the tag link for all the others that have done the tag, because it has been awesome to go and see what everyone else chooses for the Cabinet of Curiosities. Much love, people.